Thank you for joining us for today's panel discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm Clare Levison, CPA, CGMA, and I'll be the moderator of today's panel discussion. I spent over 20 years in the aerospace and defense industry in all aspects of management, project, and financial accounting. And now I own my own continuing education company where I get to do fun things like this. My focus is primarily on professional ethics, and I'm also a passionate financial literacy advocate. Now I'm going to let each of our guests tell you a little bit more about themselves. Trey, do you want to start?
Certainly. Good afternoon. My name is Reynard Trea McMillian. I'm an assistant professor of accounting at Tennessee State University. I have approximately 30 years of experience in various industries of accounting, and I'm just here to learn as much as I can about DEI today.
Wonderful. My name is Jessica Sharpe, and I work for Deloitte & Touche in the audit function, and I've been there for a little over 13 years. Spent most of my time serving in external audit of PCAOB clients in the telecom and media industries, and for the last year and a half have been focused on program managing our MADE commitment, MADE meaning making accounting diverse and equitable, and then also working strategically with our audit and assurance DE&I group.
Great. Hi, I'm Julie James, CPA. I have approximately about 17 years of accounting and auditing experience, primarily in internal audit, healthcare. I have had the opportunity to get involved with DEI with prior positions at NASBA and so forth and other companies, but I'm really looking forward for today's discussion.
Thank you. And Leslie is joining us remotely today. Leslie, can you introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about how you got involved in DE&I?
Yeah, sure. My name is Leslie Roberts. I'm a partner at Brown Edwards. We're a firm that's headquartered in Roanoke, Virginia. I sit in Newport News, Virginia. We have offices in Tennessee, West Virginia, and Virginia. The way I got involved in public accounting was through a big firm, and I've seen a lot of changes. I've been in public accounting for about a little over 35 years. And my involvement in DEI is I'm involved in our task force. I chair it. And this has really been a passion of mine for a long time. And so I'm really excited about being part of this discussion, but I'm also excited about just being in this area and being able to practice in this area, especially at the end or near the end of my career, which is really exciting. I feel like I'm really giving back.
Thank you, Leslie. So let's start our discussion. The AICPA glossary defines diversity as the similarities and differences of people found in our workforce, our customers, and in the community in which we serve. Diversity includes many characteristics that may be visible, such as race, gender, and age. It also includes less obvious characteristics like personality style, ethnicity, ability, education, religion, job function, life experience, lifestyle, sexual orientation, geography, regional differences, work experiences, and family situations that make us similar to and different from one another. What is your personal favorite definition of diversity or phrase associated with diversity?
I don't know that I have necessarily a favorite, but I think growing up in a sort of generalized environment and having the opportunity to move out of that environment and see more things and learn more and gain more exposure has opened my eyes to the opportunities that you can learn and grow from using diversity when you have people that are different from you. And so I just like to use that as a template to always be open to learning more about other people, other cultures, their beliefs, how they work, how they play, and building all of that into the definition of diversity.
Absolutely. Do you have anything to add to that?
What I like what you said, and what I like about the definition you read, it feels very expansive, right? Like it's like, wow, there's so many things. And what I really love is the concept that it's stuff that makes you different based on how you were born, but then also your lived experience. And so I think sometimes you can get very pigeonholed into what you think diversity it only means this. It only means race, ethnicity. It only, and I think it's, like building inclusive environments and being cognizant of different people's lived experiences as well, and everything that encompasses who they are. Like, we're all diverse from one another in some way. And so I think expanding that definition is critical.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Julie?
I think the definition that you said covered almost everything. But I think with those terms you use, they all equal growth. You get to see things differently. You get to somewhat experience someone else's life when you talk to them and find out something different about that they've seen or been through. So I always try to look at diversity as beyond the race and beyond the sex, but where have you lived before? Or, I'm from the South. I may learn something from you from being from Virginia, someone from up north. So trying to think of it beyond just the typical box that you spoke of.
Yeah, I think that's really important. How about you, Leslie? Did you have anything to add on our definition of diversity here?
A lot's been covered, but I just think, the need to celebrate our differences. I think that's something that we really have to come back to. We're different, and the reason we're different and what we're bringing, our different opinions, our different backgrounds and all, it can add to the discussion. And I think that's what all the buzz is about, is this makes us better. Together we're better. And so, yeah. And I like the expansive definition as well.
Yeah. Let's move on to our discussion about equity, or our discussion about our definition here of equity. The Stanford Social Innovation Review defines equity as each of us getting what we need to survive or succeed based on where we are and where we want to go. What is your favorite definition of equity or phrase associated with equity?
I like what Tracy said. I don't know if I have a favorite, but
I have to say this is my favorite definition of equity. So that's why I keep using that term.
I like it. Well, I'm going to just look at my cheat sheet, because actually this is something that from Deloitte, we have a glossary of all these terms, and I looked that up, and because I was like, what's our official viewpoint? But I really liked what it said, because it said it's the outcome of diversity and inclusion, where people have fair access, opportunity, resources, with consideration for an elimination of historical and systemic barriers. And I liked it, thinking of it as this is the outcome. Like, equity would be the outcome if we employ, our diversity and inclusion efforts. But it's not. It's also considering where we've been in the past, right? Like, so it's taking into consideration all of that and how that affects us here today, and then kind of molds what our inclusion efforts are, and to get us to an equal footing. And so I was like, oh, that's a good one, Deloitte. That's good. You're doing it. So I just wanted to read that exactly, but I really enjoyed that.
How about you?
When I think of equity, I'm thinking about meeting people where they are, figuring out what their needs are to get them on a level playing field. And that's really what this whole thing is about to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's why I loved this. Where someone is, mm-hmm. and where they want to go. Yes. I love that concept. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about you, Leslie?
Well, I really like the cheesy graphic about the people that are different sizes, and, they're not equal, how do we make them equal? Well, we can't really make them equal, but we can make their experience equitable by raising them up so they're seeing things on the same level. I don't know, that just kind of resonates with me, is we're giving them what they need to be on the same level. So I think, equality is giving everybody the same thing. And obviously that doesn't work. So equity is giving everybody what they need to succeed. And that graphic with the different sized people just works for me, where they put something under the smallest person and everybody's at the same level. So I just like that a lot. That's my fave.
So let's talk about inclusiveness. The AICPA glossary defines inclusiveness as the action or state of including or of being included within a group or structure. So I think we've all talked about the fact that the acronym for diversity, equity, inclusion is DE&I. So that's why we went in that order, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think a lot of us think it would better be diversity, inclusion, equity, but then it would be die. So that's probably not
No.
really the best idea. So that's why we're kind of going back to inclusion because it's our last letter. So what are your thoughts on the inclusion piece?
I think inclusion is huge because I can get to the job, but if I'm not at the table there to speak and be heard and be a part of the decision making of things, I'm not really included. And then even thinking about some of the aspects that come with being included. Do I have to play a game to get to be included? You know, it's huge to say I'm in this field, but is it my voice being heard?
Right.
So that's huge.
Yeah. How about you, Leslie? Thoughts on inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what I would like to have for an inclusive environment or inclusive workplace would be somewhere that everybody feels comfortable being themselves and bringing their ideas, and they don't hesitate. And I think the hesitancy is because we don't feel included. Like you said, you don't know how your ideas will be perceived. So I think, inclusion is making everybody feel comfortable sharing.
Thoughts on that?
I agree. So I think particularly for younger staff folks that are coming into the profession, learning how to be included appropriately in a professional environment is important. And so teaching people that, I'm an educator, so teaching people that is helpful to help them understand what culture looks like in the workplace and how they can get included appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a specific definition of inclusion or at least any additional thoughts?
There is we have a definition for everything. But I would say, just as we were talking, what Leslie said was really just resonated with me because it's about, like, I think about, like, where do we want to get to? And it's like being able to sit in an audit room and say, or, in whatever accounting room you're in and saying, like, oh, what are you doing this weekend? And allowing people to feel like they can bring their authentic self to work. And I know we use that term a lot, but it's just being able to share and grow. And I was just on a trip with our DE&I group, and we had planned this planning meeting, and we were out of town together, and it was so great to actually be in person. And we didn't realize that we planned it on the same week as one of the members in our group was celebrating a Hindu holiday that lasted 9 days. And so she couldn't partake in certain, she can't have meat or egg, or there was a couple of restrictions there. And we didn't know that about her and had planned we're going to a steakhouse and it was just and she was such a good sport. I was like, oh, how would you have known? And we're like, well, we're the inclusion people, right? But it was just, and it was so great to be okay, well, we want to plan these out. If anything, next time we plan this out, definitely let us know and we'll schedule it around, because this holiday comes 2 times a year. So we were it would probably fall on the same time again. And it was just really great to sit around and talk and be yeah, absolutely. And she's like, of course, why wouldn't I think even to say something? And I think it's just building that environment where it's of course, when next time we schedule it, we should ask around and say, does anybody have something that we should take into consideration?
So in my opinion, so some of those things that she didn't, I think she's so accustomed to not having to introduce it so that people work around it that she didn't maybe feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah, or just didn't even think about
it. Or it didn't even come to mind that maybe I can include this and we could change the date. And so the inclusive part of that process is getting those understandings out on the table so that people can work around it now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the response was oh my gosh, why did we schedule this now and stuff? And she was like, you're right. I know you guys totally would have rescheduled. But I was there are probably some environments where people are I don't know if they would. I'm not going to say it because I don't know if they would.
Right. So that balance has to.
And just raising that awareness, I think, and that's what we're trying to do here today is raise awareness on the part of everyone that it's okay to let people know that kind of information. And then, it's okay to be receiving that and then responding to what people are putting forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, finally, when it comes to our definitions, the AICPA glossary defines bias as an inclination or of preference, especially one that interferes with impartial judgment. So what are your thoughts on a definition of bias or phrase associated with bias?
So that was a very good presentation on unconscious bias on a local news station about a year ago, and it really got me intrigued. And that's sort of where I got interested in this topic. Everybody has biases. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes that your preference. And so understanding those, both from the receiving end and from the delivering end, will help people understand. So if you know what your unconscious biases are, you can make better decisions. And so I think that's something that we need to expand upon in the workplace and in our profession particularly. Having people become aware of those unconscious biases so that, hey, look what I did, look what I said, potentially how that could impact someone else. So I like to throw that implicit or unconscious on front of it. So,
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, because I think unconscious bias is much more prevalent. I think that there's probably some conscious bias, and that's maybe more synonymous with prejudices or something. But I think what we encounter daily is more on the unconscious side, or hopefully is more on the unconscious side, where it is about preferences. And I think it's then imperative for companies to put processes in place saying, hey, we know that this is just inherent in human nature. And so how can we set up processes to make sure that this doesn't impact negatively those in our workforce? And so I think that's where it's the imperative on the company to say, we recognize that we're going to teach our professionals how to see it, like what you're saying, educate, and then also set up processes to make sure it doesn't negatively affect.
So one of the things I found interesting in this particular video, this color performance presentation, was that implicit bias was the largest predictor of behavior. Mm-hmm. Yet since it's unconscious, we don't know it. We just act upon it because that's the natural way for us to do things. And so getting people more in touch with their behaviors, their biases, can change a workplace dramatically.
I think that a bias is almost like wearing a lens, and I see things based on my personal experiences. Yeah. And it's hard not to behave in that way. That's what you know. And I think we go back to the definition of diversity. Being able to be around people and see how they live or their experiences kind of helps me shift my lens, right? To not always see things my way or what I think they should be because of how I grew up or how I experience things at work. But trying to be objective in decision making, be objective when I have conversations and not put personal feelings into things is trying to be self-aware of any bias that I grew up with or that I learned or developed over time. And it's hard to do. I won't say that it's not hard to do. That's just naturally how you behave or how you speak, or something happened before that triggered a thought that, this is the same situation, but I cannot bring the past into a current situation and treat it as the same thing. Those are just different biases that I've experienced, and I'm still growing to this day to try to look at things differently and not put my own lens over it.
Excellent points for
Thank
sure. Leslie, initial thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to add one thing. We did some unconscious bias training. We did firm-wide unconscious bias training, and I think people were really apprehensive about it because I think, I think when somebody brought it up, I think people think biases are bad. They're not the same thing as prejudice. They are things that we bring with us just because of our experiences, where we've been, what we've done. And I think, the training was really well received when people kind of got over that and said, we've all got these things. That's how we learn to deal. We need to learn to deal with our biases so we can interact on a more appropriate basis. And it wasn't, I think people were afraid of the training, actually, because they didn't want to just, kind of embrace their own biases and kind of deal with them. But afterwards, I had such good conversations with people. I mean, it really opened up conversations, because I think we think bias is bad, but bias isn't bad. It's a part of who we are. But we need to make sure that it doesn't overly influence our decisions, like what you just said about, putting that different lens on, and definitely trying to push down some implicit bias that you would have right away from something that happened before. This isn't the person I dealt with before. This isn't the same situation. So it's hard, but I mean, I think that that's kind of been a very eye-opening training that we've had. And I think we're looking to do something next year. And there's another one that says, okay, now you know your biases. What do you do? So I mean, I think that's the next step, recognizing them and then acting on them. But I do think that that bias get a bad rap, that they're bad. They're just you. And there's something that you need to deal with. And so, yeah.
Just
It was
kind
a
of
real
that,
learning experience for our firm.
and that we all have our own set of experiences.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit further about some of these definitions. The AICPA glossary defines workplace diversity in the following way. Workplace diversity refers to the variety of differences between people in an organization. That sounds simple, but diversity encompasses race, gender, ethnic group, age, personality, cognitive style, tenure, organizational function, education background, and more. So now we've added even more aspects of diversity to our official AICPA definitions. At this point, are there any other differences that you can think of that we should be mindful of in the workplace that you'd put into that and more category? Or what ones stand out the most to you that are kind of overlooked in lieu of more traditional categories like race, gender, age, things like that?
When I think about working with differences in a workplace setting, we have a training at Deloitte that talks about, it's like a personality training called business chemistry, but it really kind of helps you understand like a Myers-Briggs of like, this is your working style. Right. And it's at first when they created it, I was like, what are we doing creating our own thing? But it has been so helpful in understanding most people I work with. I'm like, okay, what's your type? Like you can be like an integrator or a driver, or there's like 4 different types, but it really does help me understand like, okay, if you're an integrator, you want to like pass around ideas, like you want to like synthesize through all of that. So like if I'm going to have a meeting with you, then we're going to talk through those kind of things. If you're like a driver, you're like, get to that point. And so if I'm with you, like, it's not helpful for me to be like, hey, let me get your ideas. You're like, no, tell me your idea and let's start moving. And so I find when I read that question, that was the first thing that popped into my mind over on top of all these other things. But it's just like understanding who you're working with and what is their work style. So maybe just one thing to layer onto all of those, but something that's helpful.
Are there any other aspects of diversity that you've encountered that might be non-traditionally thought of? Examples?
I had a list written down. Now, will they all come to mind now? No. But I thought about just even speech impediments. Mm-hmm. We have a president who said he had an issue with the speech impediment growing up, but he's now president, right? I think about the Crown Act, just even my hair going to work is diversity, right? Mm-hmm. I think about physical needs and mental needs that we probably have spoken more about lately in the past few years in regards to mental health, even thinking about those. Like if I take a mental health day on Friday, how is that going to come across at work? But those are a few things that I think about in the diversity space outside of just race and gender.
How about you, Leslie? Any thoughts on that?
Well, the only one that I thought of that wasn't mentioned here explicitly was the sexual orientation. And I think that's something that we're just now starting to delve into and, try to be inclusive and understand. And the other thing I thought about was just life experiences that makes you diverse, where you've been from. I mean, what you've done in the past, what you've experienced. So I just think that diversity is huge. Like, we can keep expanding upon it. And I like your idea, the speech impediment. Didn't even think about that. People that have some type of disability that makes them not able to communicate the same way that you and I do. Do they still have good ideas? Sure, probably even better, because they've been watching and listening more than we have, because we're too busy talking. So yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that's really, there's a lot to wrap your mind around.
Try, you have anything we've covered.
We've covered that one.
And it just, they're endless, right? I think that's the point, is that we have to open up our minds to how many different aspects of diversity really do exist in the world.
Absolutely.
How does inclusion differ from diversity, do you think? I've heard people say, diversity is just the what or the who, and the inclusion is actually taking advantage of or making the most of, however you want to phrase it, that diversity. So, really reaping the benefits of having diverse people at the table. That alone isn't enough if they don't feel like they can speak up and be heard. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, a lot of companies tried this, 15, 20 years ago, the 360 reviews. So the lower level employees, the staff level, could review their managers. I think that's one way to do that, right? I think people need to understand from both sides of the organization what their performance is, how they're viewed in the office, and then make adjustments as necessary. Back to that bias concept, including feedback from every level of the organization can help expose some of those biases and help people work on them to become a better manager or a better employee.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what you said was really spot on for what I was thinking. It's not enough just to hire in diversity and say, okay, we did it, we're done. And I think that's a fear of mine, is that companies can focus in on that, and then their employees get there and don't feel included. Don't feel like, I think you said earlier, you can be invited to the table and then but still maybe not have a seat at the table per se. And so I think that's the big difference there, is that if people are just thinking, okay, we care about diversity, but we're not thinking about inclusion, I mean, that's the crux of everything.
You need both pieces, right? What are you thinking?
You do need both pieces, because like we said about diversity, it's not all about race and gender. You can have just a homogeneous set of people in the room and someone still not be included. Even have a seat at the table and not have a voice. And when you do have a voice, I'm wondering, is my comment going to be considered in decision making, right? You may hear me in the meeting, or you may take notes or take it with you, but when the outcome of that decision is shown, has my view been considered? Are we putting biases on those things? So I just think it's important to think of it beyond just, because we're all different, we're all diverse, I sit here as a Black person, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be any diverse or less diverse than you.
And it's not your only aspect of diversity.
Correct.
Yeah. Leslie, thoughts on having diversity versus including that, making sure that inclusion piece is there also?
Yeah, I mean, just like you started out to say, I've heard this: diversity is the what, inclusion is the how, is what is the terminology I've heard. And I think that inclusion means we're not considering diversity anymore. For everybody to feel included, we've kind of we've not removed diversity, but we're not holding anything against anybody. So diversity is just accepted. So we create inclusiveness. So I think they're kind of they toggle each other,
Yeah, we're back to that. You really need both. You really need to focus on both pieces. We've talked about bias. How do you think bias can create an environment that lacks diversity?
That's a question.
I thought about this a little bit, and my father used to say this, and I don't know who to attribute the quote to, but if we're all thinking the same, are we really thinking?
That's good.
I mean, so everybody should be able to provide some input to a process, even if their bias is interjected into that input. Let's look at it and evaluate it and determine how it's going to make us get better. But if we're all sort of the robot, everybody thinking the same way, we're going to limit the opportunities for us to expand and grow as a workforce.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to what you said. If you're only wearing the lens of your own experience all the time,
That's all you know.
then before you know it,
Mm-hmm.
that has affected the amount of diversity because you're using that lens to tend to gravitate toward people, decisions with that fall in line with your similar set of experiences. So I think Leslie mentioned when we originally started the discussion that equality was everyone getting the same thing versus equity, like we talked about, being people getting what they need to succeed. And I just think that that's really important, as we close this section of the discussion, and really important distinction, again, for people to recognize. Let's talk about some reasons for focusing on DE&I. The AICPA put out an infographic, 10 reasons to focus on diversity and inclusion. And each of you have seen this infographic. And so my question is, which of these reasons resonates the most with you? What do you think, Julie?
I think the collaboration one stuck out with me, going back to having your voice heard and just having different ideas and thoughts at the table and how that can impact just the bottom line of a company because you have different thoughts at the table.
Which resonated the most with you, Leslie?
It may be the same slide, the one foster innovation and creativity. I think, we come up with better solutions when everybody gives their opinion or adds to the discussion. And I think, it's a business imperative. If we want to be more successful, we need to hear everybody's voice so we make a better decision. So I kind of like that one the best.
How about you?
Sort of the same lines,
Yeah.
the demographic shifts, the changes that are coming to our country, we need to be able to work within those changes and understand the needs, particularly in the business communities, and how that impacts us. And so I think that's the most important one.
Which reason resonated the most with you?
Yeah, when I first read them, I think it's the social responsibility as well, just that it's inherent in what I think a lot of companies are realizing that their stakeholders are more than their shareholders, and so there's a social responsibility that companies have, and it's been exciting to see that. I feel like that trend of companies realizing that has become more and more, and to me that resonates the most as well.
I know we had talked prior to this about the grow intellectually as well. I think we had a discussion. What do you think about that growing intellectually aspect of DE&I?
Of getting diverse opinions.
Yeah, as a benefit.
Like helps. Oh gosh.
We talked about it not being a technical, right? It's not a technical skill. It's not a technical competence type topic. It's a topic where you get to grow in person to person, sort of social, emotional type ways.
Well, and I can speak just personally to my own lived experience is that I've always been very passionate about our talent experience, but I have not personally been involved in as many of our diversity and inclusion efforts that are focused on our specific cohorts in the past. And in coming into this role, I think it's something I've always kind of personally really cared about and sought out, but I haven't really been involved in it in the lens of what all that Deloitte was doing. And now I feel like I have grown so much in this last year and a half of just hearing, there's so many times I get into a room or a Zoom room, if you will, and whether it's in terms of like race or ethnicity, I'm the minority in the Zoom room, and it's been so helpful. Like I just have learned so much, and hearing more and more, I would say, diverse opinions and things that people are bringing up to my awareness that I wasn't aware of. And I think it's impacted everything about my life in such a beautiful, positive way. And so I'm like, as much as we can, I'm like, want to bring everyone in. I'm like, come on into all these conversations I'm having. It's just been very helpful.
I think one of the things that we do as CPAs is that we dedicate ourselves to be lifelong learners, mostly from a formal standpoint. But the cultural competence, the informal learning is just as important. And you combine those and you start to learn more things, and you grow and you become a better person, a better employer.
Oh, yeah.
Just been self-aware. I think it's really brought a lot to me because it makes me rethink how I think about things. And it's growth for me personally.
Yeah. Leslie, what are your thoughts on the growth aspects or the grow intellectually benefit of DE&I?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's all part of everybody having a different perspective. We grow they have a totally different opinion than we do sometimes. And I don't know, you're talking about the whole DEI and kind of getting involved in this. And really, it's opened my eyes up to different cultural differences, things I never considered. We do like a cultural calendar, and you would think that a lot of the ones that we start out with would be familiar to me, but they're not. I don't even know how can we like understand each other when we don't understand what each other are celebrating? So, I mean, it's just been, focusing on diversity has made me a better boss, a better friend, and a better parent. It really has, because I'm really listening now, so I think, the reasons, the bottom line reason is just very compelling. We want to look like our future clients, and the demographic, like you said, the demographic shifts are huge. But I think once you start embracing these philosophies and really start exploring them, you grow as a person. And I think that's the type of leaders we want in our profession.
I agree. There's two other boxes on here that I thought were interesting and kind of went hand in hand, especially in our current economy with labor shortages, et cetera. And those were talent acquisition and cultivating engagement. And I think they kind of go hand in hand, because if you want to attract and retain the best talent, then you have to cultivate engagement with that talent. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'd like to give Deloitte a pat on the back, because the local office came to us recently and asked for a non-traditional candidate, someone who may not have graduated, someone may have stopped out. So they're looking to build a program around teaching them the cultural competence of working in a professional office and get them engaged into the profession. And so I was very excited about that. And I was able to nominate a young man. He was actually hired. So those are the type of things that excite me about the opportunities that firms like Deloitte are offering us. So it was great.
Yeah. What are you seeing with the talent acquisition aspects and the cultivating engagement aspects?
Well, perfectly. Thank you for that. That's awesome.
You can pay
$20 there. Yeah. No, but that's really exciting, because we are very focused on that internally. So I feel really excited when people see that externally as well. It's like, oh, good. Okay. So like people are feeling the impacts of that, I guess, of the focus that we have. I would say, just if I hum a few bars about the MADE initiative that we have, it's a commitment, actually, MADE commitment of making accounting diverse and equitable. It's a $75 million commitment Deloitte has made over the next 5 years in order to increase the racial and ethnic diversity of the accounting profession, and specific to Black and Hispanic Latinx students and professionals. And so it is wide sweeping, but it's very focused on, a lot of our core programming is very focused on pre-university and university students, and in trying to understand, like, where is our pipeline? How do we build that pipeline? Because if we have all of these goals internally of we want this mix of racial and ethnic diversity by X date, like, we can't rely on the current pipeline of students coming through. And so it's really like, where are the barriers there? How do we explain the attractiveness of the profession? We think it's attractive, we like it, but it's like, how do we sell it as a career and not just a job? And how do we sell about, like, this is what accounting can do for you, or a career through accounting can do for you, and change, and potentially change even, like, your socioeconomic class could change your trajectory into the future of different things you can do. And so that's really what we're focusing on over these last 5 years.
So I went to a session at the AICPA. I can't remember what it was called, but basically we were the discussion was, how do we make accounting more interesting, right? Because you got all these things out there with all these great names. There's one of my son's classmates is studying, it's really just engineering, but they had a really cool name for it, and I can't recall it right now, metronomics or something.
They're like, we know this is engineering.
Or yeah. But they had a really great name for it. I'm thinking we should do that. But then when you start having conversations, it's like, I don't know how to do. And so figuring out if helping minorities understand what accounting is first. Mm-hmm. And then, so basically I face this when I start talking to students. If they know what it is, they see it as too difficult a hurdle for them to leap. So, and most of them just don't know. So how do we make it attractive enough to get people interested to come and learn about it is a big task.
Yeah.
I think that cultivating diversity impacts the pipeline tremendously, because a lot of times I think about, over the years, not seeing someone that looks like me in certain positions or even in the profession. So how can I go out and promote a profession and bring students into this, and they come in and some are not comfortable with not seeing someone who, and that's beyond gender, race, like we speak about the LGBTQ, or someone with a speech impediment, someone, whatever it may be. But if I don't see someone that looks like me in a profession, it's going to be hard for me to, like, I want to do that. Or
To envision yourself.
Yes, I need to be able to see myself there. So it's important.
What are you seeing, Leslie, in terms of talent acquisition and DE&I initiatives? Yes.
Well, I do, it's a topic in our interviews. When we are interviewing new candidates, they want to know what we're doing in the space. They want to know how involved we are and so forth. But as far as pipeline, I mean, I think it's important that we get into the high schools and maybe even the middle schools to start talking about what we do, because like you said, maybe we could put a fancier name on it and it would be more attractive. But I do think that they just think math and they don't think people. And I think we need to get in and let them know it's not just math. A lot of what we do is people stuff. We interact with people all the time. And we've started an initiative to get CPAs in the local classrooms. And we've been working through the DECA group. It's like a business club that's in most high schools, and trying to just talk to their students. And I've been sending, not me, but some of our younger staff in to talk to them about, what accounting really is. But I do think, just like engineering, it just seems so technical and maybe so difficult that that's a barrier in itself from anybody considering it. So I think we've got a long way to go as a profession. And like you said, this is something we can't do. We can't change the name of accounting, but we can try to make it more attractive, and we can try to share what we really do. I don't think people really understand what we do and what they can do with a career in accounting. I think they just think numbers.
They don't understand the diversity of accounting.
That's true.
That's true. It really
That's
is
a good
true.
way to put it.
There's a lot of places they can go. There's a lot of things they can do with it. And I think that they don't understand the diversity of accounting. And I think the pipeline is a huge problem, and I think it's not like something that's going to be solved overnight. I think it's something that firms like Deloitte and like smaller firms like us, we have to realize it's part of our responsibility to build that pipeline. Just like you as a professor, you can make them understand better. But I might never talk to them unless I make a conscious effort to get them before they make that decision to major in whatever. So.
Well, and I think a key statistic, and I feel very bad because I think it's a CAQ report that was put out, but it was stating that over 90 or 80 to 90% of individuals that go into the accounting profession are because they know personally somebody in the accounting profession. So either a parent or an uncle or like a mentor or something like, and so what we really realized is like, you're perpetuating a cycle of, these there's lack of racial and ethnic diversity. And then like, they don't see exactly what you said, like they don't see somebody that looks like them and they don't know anyone.
Right.
And so that's not even a possibility. And so really it's where we're focusing so much is getting in the classroom and like setting up like mentorship programs and things like that, just so people can hear that it's an option, because most people aren't hearing that because no one in their sphere of influence is an accountant.
That's right.
So we've talked about some of the benefits of talent acquisition when it comes to DE&I, but what do you think about the retention aspects of cultivating that engagement? So how does that play into people staying and feeling more loyal, I guess you might say, to the organization?
It's interesting. So I have a mentee who started with a Big Four firm. She's graduated in May of 21. Yes. Trying to get my years. COVID's throwing everything off from a calendar standpoint. So she's working with the firm, and so she's 2 parts of the exam under her belt. She's making nice progression, but she says, "Well, I get all the dirty jobs. I get the bottom. Well, you're the newbie, so that's the way it works." And so I try to explain to people that you have to sort of build a foundation and show and prove that you understand the basics before you get to higher level tasks. And so the comment was, "Well, am I always just going to be doing this?" No. Again, there's a diverse amount of jobs that you can do and work in and grow into, but you have to have that foundation first. I think that's probably not explained well enough from people who sit in my chair, because they see me or either one of you and they go, "Oh, look, they're doing great. They look like they're having fun. They're not doing journal entries and rants anymore."
No.
But you have to build to that, right? It's just not an automatic thing. And so sort of understanding the hierarchy of a work environment, a professional environment would help with that, I believe, with the retention.
What are your thoughts on retention and retention related to DE&I initiatives when people do feel included, or when people feel like there's good communication channels open to explain to them things like Trey was just talking about?
I mean, I think that's the golden key everyone's solving for right now is retention. And I think diversity plays a huge aspect into that, because the number one reason people are leaving jobs is because either work-life balance or they don't feel like it's a I don't want to say home. I feel like that's not right, but they don't feel at home there, or maybe that's a way to say it.
Connected. How about they don't feel connected?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, tag team. Yeah, and they don't feel connected. And so especially now in this environment where we're virtual and there's this lack of connection already, it's how do we make sure that our professionals feel heard, feel connected, feel valued? And so I think for us, like we're talking about that daily within our DE&I group, is like solving for retention, solving for culture. To me, that kind of feels synonymous, is like you're solving for culture, and then I think retention follows if you can solve for that.
So much I could say with that question. So I've been trying to ponder. I think it impacts retention in so many different ways. Sometimes people don't feel like they have a voice at work, so it's easier to leave. And when they do have a voice, what's happening with what I said, how am I going to be treated after I say what I say? Even just, you speak of like what we call grunt work. You know, at some point in your career, you think I should be beyond that, and having to advocate for yourself to get to those, you know, get out of the technical piece and get into some of the decision making and something that's going to be growth for you. It's not always just, you know, oh, you hit your year, you get promoted. You have to sometimes make these different moves, and that can be tiresome. And sometimes it's easier to jump to another job. And it sometimes is a question you ask with the resume, or somebody's moved around, but the why. Have you asked why? What did they experience before that has created this feeling that I need to leave? Something you mentioned earlier, I'm trying to remember what it was. Being your authentic self. A lot of people can't bring their authentic selves to work, and that is huge and why they leave.
Yeah, and I think maybe now we've circled back a little bit to that equity piece.
Yeah.
Of finding out where people are at and where they want to go. And so if they're at the place where they're not particularly liking the grunt work, then explaining to them, this is how you're going to get from where you're at to where you want to go. Thoughts on that, Leslie?
Well, I mean, I just think, you know, as far as retention, inclusion is just huge. And like you said, in this virtual environment, it makes it even more challenging. But if I don't feel like the people that I work with respect what I've got to say or value my opinion, then I'm probably going to move on. So I think, you know, getting this inclusive environment where people feel heard, feel comfortable is just huge in retention. And I know we have had in our market, because of the virtual arrangement, we've had people recruit into our market from outside of our market where the cost of living is higher. And they're offering them money that we can't afford to offer because we can't charge the fees they charge in that environment because our cost of living is lower. And so, you know, to fill that void, inclusion. You know, why do people stay in jobs? Because they feel included. They feel they're part of something bigger and things matter. So we've really been pushing the diversity and inclusion in lieu of what we can't do, raise raises to compete with other localities. So I think it's huge for retention. It's a piece of the puzzle that we've got to have to retain talent.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, I think we've come to the end of our first 50 minutes of discussion. So thank you all for joining me today. And Leslie, thank you for joining us virtually. And thank you all for joining us today as well.
We hope you enjoyed your on-demand course. You may now submit your attendance verification codes. Thank you for attending this TSCPA on-demand video course. We look forward to continuing to serve as your source for high-quality CPE. Have a great day.